Play, Watch, Listen is a game development and games industry podcast hosted by three people who work in game development. The show is entirely independent and supported by Patreon, who actually got sort of a lost episode. I kept the last episode of Play, Watch, Listen just because of some of the contents as a Patreon exclusive, but otherwise, patrons usually get episodes early and unedited cuts as well. But whether you support on Patreon or not, we appreciate you being here and we hope you enjoy the show. Hello, welcome. We don't intro the show at the start, so I feel weird every time we do it, but when we have a guest, it seems impolite not to. Hi, welcome everybody. This is Play Watch Listen. Today we are joined by Matt. Matt, who are you and what are you doing here?
We got lost.
Hi, I'm Matt Nava. I'm the creative director at Giant Squid. We just did a game called Sword of the Sea, and yeah, what am I doing here? I don't know. I don't know. We're gonna talk.
Guess we'll find out.
Yeah,
And this is what Austin, your fourth time working together, two of you?
yeah,
Third under the
yes,
banner of Giant Squid, and fourth when you include Journey,
Right.
which I definitely always include since it really felt like the start. It felt like a pretty lateral move to shift from Journey into Abzu. Um, so sometimes, yeah, I'm like, oh right, those were different. Those were different studios. Those were completely different teams. It
That
always
is
makes me
weird to think
laugh when I
about.
see the articles that are like, from a lot of the folks that worked on Journey uh came Abzu and such. I see a kind of glossing over in a lot of
it's
articles.
hard, man. It's hard. Nobody understands this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is almost everybody, right? At the very least, you have the same DNA. I feel like the games are of a similar genre, and the genre is very unique to these particular games. Like, I think it's funny when Sort of the Sea came up. Was it on like a Summer Game Fest or a PlayStation? I don't remember where it was revealed. And immediately I was like, I think Austin's probably working on this. And then all of the names came up, and I was like, oh yeah, that's an Austin game. And then I think I texted you, and you were like, yeah, of course. It's
Actually,
like,
well, the way I
excellent.
remember that going down was I was not watching the showcase, so I think you assumed I was because you got a text that just said, "Is this one you?" And I had no idea. I was like eating lunch or something. I had no
Austin's
idea.
like, I do a lot of compositions, Alana. You're going to have to be more specific.
Be specific.
I just had no, it didn't even occur to me you were watching trailers or something because I had forgotten. I don't remember what it was, like a Sony showcase or whatever.
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah,
the only
yeah.
time you ever said that was when Solar Ash had its, you were like, did you work on that? Because that seems like a game you would work on. And that made me
Yeah.
laugh.
And
And I
that
was
one
like,
was
nope,
wrong, right? That wasn't you? Yeah, I
that
was
was,
like,
no,
wow,
that
someone's moving on your turf. You gotta lock that down, Austin. It's a
file
pretty
my
glowy video
patent.
game. Someone's gotta get out of here. But why don't you guys tell us about Sword of the Sea? It is, like I said, absolutely beautiful. I know it's a PlayStation exclusive. It's beautiful and it's extremely relaxing. I got similar feeling that I got to Abzu when I first started playing that. Journey, obviously. But what was the plan or the core design pillar going into the game? What was the story you were trying to tell this time around?
Yeah, the Sword of the Sea. It's a surfing game, and you are the wraith, an ancient warrior who is awoken in a land where all the wars have already been fought, and you have to figure out what your purpose is, what you do with your sword now that there's nobody left to fight. And um, your character is kind of awoken as a new being and has a new kind of naivete that lets them experience the world for the first time and connect with it in a new way. And of course, what they do is go surfing. And you transform sandy areas into ocean areas. And one of the big cool features of the game is that the terrain is moving like waves. So you're constantly thinking about what that wave is doing as you're coming at it because you get momentum going down slopes and it keeps you engaged with the movement. It's very much a movement centric game. Um, anyway, that's a little bit about the idea behind the game.
The perpetual waves, is that difficult to program? I don't know if that's the right way to ask that question, but it
Yeah,
seems very complicated.
yeah, it is in many ways. And we spent, 5 years trying to figure it out.
That's crazy. Yeah, I guess it makes sense though. Like that specifically, and the way that they flow in this game is very natural, right? Like I feel like it really looks completely organic. Whereas, I've seen a lot of games struggle with waves specifically. Like and you've got so many of them. It's like
Oh
such a
yeah.
large area and it doesn't cut into itself. Like it's
Yeah.
huge.
There's like the challenge of getting the data to, be you know, fast enough because you're updating the shape of the terrain every frame. The player has to collide with that. Most games, you kind of render out the terrain once, and that's just, you don't have to worry about it anymore. But we change it every frame. And so that's just a technical challenge. But then there's another challenge of how do you author the waves? How do you tell it to go this way? How do you tell them to
Hmm.
be this high here? Because they blend and shift depending on the shape of the area. And we came up with this system of kind of collaging stamps of waves, and each wave stamp had animating waves in it, and they could blend together on the edges, and you could you could rotate them and like piece together um, the kind of shape of all the waves.
Are you kind of
Um,
running that from the shader then? You taking like kind of a shader first approach to it? Is that the way?
Absolutely. It's
That makes
it's a
sense.
it's just an absolutely gargantuan shader. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
That's what do you when you say every frame? What
mhm.
do you what I like I want to say what do you mean by that? Like I
Moving image is
understand what you're
constructed
saying
of,
every
yeah.
frame
Every single
and
frame, yeah. And the
why?
game has to run, a game like this, you got to be running it really fast, like 60 frames a second.
Yeah.
Um, but our character moves so quickly um, that we actually test the character's position against the waves to make sure that you don't go through the ground at an even higher rate, like 120 times a second. Um, and yeah, every single frame that terrain is in a different shape. It's moved from here to there just a tiny little bit, and
We should dig into that a little bit more because
yeah,
people like us to be nerds on this show. Like colliders, I don't think people understand A, how expensive collision is in games, B, how much we fake and lie, and as you say, make everything static so that it's not expensive. But crucially, the frame by frame thing is a specific thing that's counterintuitive unless you've written video game code, which is you're making every frame happen, and if an object is moving, it's not actually moving in a continuous way. It's essentially teleporting from point to point every frame that you're doing your colliders on. So what you're saying with the moving of the waves, I guess you would have to run that physics simulation incredibly high fidelity because
yeah,
a moving object that's moving towards you as you're moving fast, they're going to intersect. It's one of the things that people, when they're making their first games, run into very quickly is they try and make like a shoot 'em up, and the bullets just fly through an enemy because it's frame one, it's there before the enemy, and then it's after the enemy, and that stuff isn't interpolated. Which obviously there are technical ways of
Hmm.
doing that, but like, yeah, what you're describing with the waves, that is kind of the nightmare scenario from a physics perspective.
You chose the
And then to
hardest
make that
possible
fun as
option.
well. Yeah.
exactly. We chose the hardest possible thing to do, and I remember,
Yeah.
when we were pitching this game, and I told our technical director and our lead programmers about it. They're like, "Oh my God, you're a crazy person."
Yeah.
Um,
What
but
what
yeah,
are CTOs for if they'll tell you you're being
yeah,
crazy though? That is
yeah, and somehow, but they loved it too because it was such a fun problem to solve.
It's
yeah.
like, but it also transforms, right? There are parts in the game where you're surfing on sand and then it transforms into water. And the
Yes.
water looks different to the sand.
Hmm.
This
And
is a
what's
nightmare.
it is, and that's another aspect of the challenge is that another quirk of rendering is that transparent objects are more expensive to render generally. So it's quite costly um, to render that every frame. It adds to the time, so you have to optimize it further. And
Are you essentially, is it one terrain system that you're kind of flipping between those two shader states to do that, or are you kind of over there? I've not played the game, so are you overlaying those, or are you kind of
it's one
essentially is
terrain.
everything
Yeah.
always water, but it's rendering as sand at appropriate moments? Is it like that, or is it?
Yes. So I'm glad we're getting into this technical stuff. This is fun.
This is what people like that about this. We're good.
We either
This is
talk
what people
about that or
want.
Star Wars, so it's
It's
pretty
this,
good
or
to
we talk
be.
Or
about like Jerry Goldsmith for like
or
Yeah,
4 hours.
or
So
the
like it's
definition of
fine.
words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, yeah.
This is us
The
on good
way
behavior.
the way it works is it's one terrain, and there's all kinds of materials that we have on there. We have sand, we have gravel, we have water, we have rock, we have ice, we have snow, and every area, every point on the terrain actually is calculating all of the ones, all of it at once, and then including water. So you have to optimize that. For a very long time, we didn't have the time to optimize it, so it was just doing all of them very slow. But you do an optimization where you grid up the terrain and you say, okay, will this part ever turn to water? No. Then you don't have to run the
Right.
water part, you know? And so only the parts where it actually turns to water, they run both because it has to seamlessly blend between
And it's
both.
like doing a vertex color filter to kind of transition between those or something.
Yeah, exactly. We
Yeah.
create
But it's
like
running
a
both at once for any
at
that.
once.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Shaders are so expensive for that reason that you are basic. The transparency opaque thing is the bit that's absolutely crazy. Like doing both
yeah.
of those on one shader, that's amazing. That's really
And
cool.
the
And
way we
again,
do the
the ripple effects look
transparency,
completely different on the transparent ones too. Like they are, and it's really seamless. Like very impressive.
yeah, the ripple effects as well, that's all built in there. And like the water has a different little,
Yeah.
3D kind of displaced small waves across it from the sand. Um, yeah, the amount of time we spent building that and adding detail to it, and it was, a huge part of the challenge of the project because, one thing that's really interesting is people know what sand looks like. They know what water looks like and ice and all these things. But we're taking things that you recognize, but then we're changing one thing, and so we have to make sure that you still understand what it is immediately. And ice was really hard because when you think of ice, it's flat, it doesn't move, it's not, it's frozen, right? But we're like, okay, but can we have it be lumpy and moving, and can you still recognize that it's ice?
Mm.
Um, and so the answer was to make it so that it moves very slowly. Like when you go to find icy areas, the waves are there, but they're just in slow motion. And that made it feel more frozen, even though they're lumpy in this very, surreal way. You can still recognize it as
Mm.
ice.
It's cool.
Just seeing how far we could push it was a
Do
interesting
you
part.
do you remember how quickly the like first kind of iteration of this was working? Because in my mind, there was a viable prototype that obviously lacked all the kind of prettiness that the game shipped with, and like all the polish and optimization and everything that you're describing that really makes it really obvious. This is sand that's wave moving in a wave like way that's very surreal for sand to move in, and it's transforming into water, and then you see things below. Obviously, the polish of that all kind of was by degrees and exponential, as is pretty much always the case. But in my mind, the wave tech on in some level was pretty early, right? Am I just
We
like,
had waves early, yeah. The tech actually evolved from our terrain system all the way back to Abzu. Like we did custom terrain for that game that let us collage 3D meshes, and then it projected as continuous surface across them, and that let us like piece together these caves and areas that you would explore just as authoring, making it easier to author.
mm,
But then the Pathless, our game after that, was one giant island. And it was kind of like a single, um, you know, uh, mountainous terrain. But we had a system that could update that terrain quickly for iteration. And that actually let us have real-time updates. And we're like, oh, we could do something with that, and then we realized, on sort of the sea that it could actually be done at runtime, not just as part of our development process.
I did not realize that till
Yeah.
this moment. I did not. I remember being blown away in the early days of Pathless when there was like an entire open world map from one day to the next, basically. But it wasn't being like procedurally generated at runtime, every time in order to you just magically had this ability to make a giant space relatively fast, and in order to not like place every rock and tree, one at a time for the next 20 years.
Yeah, on Pathless, we were experimenting with more procedural generation for the terrain. But after making that game, I wanted to have more hand control of the spaces and build more bespoke spaces and really make every part unique. And so we went back a little bit towards our process that we used to make Abzu for sort of the sea. But we retained that ability to like update the terrain and improved it and made it a feature for gameplay. And so yeah, all the games kind of have built on the tech and explorations of the prior one.
Never occurred to me though that that thing that let the world get so big so relatively quickly in Pathless, I don't think I knew until this moment that essentially trying to just run that in real time is kind of at least on some level, the genetic predecessor to
Yeah.
being to the wave tech and sort of the sea. That's freaking awesome.
Yeah, it was fun. When we started Sword of the Sea, we had the terrain from Pathless, so we're like, well, bring that in, let's surf on that, see how that is. So we were surfing around in the forest for a few months,
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was fun.
I mean, that's the correct way to do stuff, right? Is do tiny iterations on the previous
Hmm.
thing and then change everything else, like so you don't have to build everything from the ground up. It
It's
seems
my
like the
favorite kind of
smartest possible
prototype.
option.
Like
Yeah.
there's some amazing footage of the early Horizon prototypes where they were just like Killzone characters running around fighting
Right.
dinosaurs made of tanks and stuff. Like I love that
Yeah, I saw
stage of
that.
development where you're just grabbing any assets you can. Basically, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
I was going to say, actually, to that end, it's a shame that most of the time you can't see that process. Like most of the time, obviously,
Oh, we hide the hell out of it. Yeah.
it's either hidden on purpose or it's no one thinks to kind of like capture it. It's because
Yeah.
obviously the build scrubs all those things away. So
Hmm.
unless you keep an archive
I've
of the
always
builds,
said I'd love if games release blooper reels. Like there was this
right?
period of time with God of War Ragnarok where the birds hadn't been animated, so anytime anything was flying, it was just like an image, and I
Right.
laughed every single time. There were also like periods where the wolves didn't walk, so they were just sliding, and like it was just I'm like I wish that we had recorded those and then like posted a blooper reel of like. It's very basic stuff, but it looks so funny, and I'm sad that those never exist. They're just gone to build updates. Like we should be recording up bloopers, I think.
The
It's entertaining.
animation bugs, like the ones you're
Yeah.
talking about, they're always so funny.
Yeah.
Every game has them. Um, on Pathless, you can pet the eagle, but for a while, the whenever you started petting the eagle, its neck would just extend and turn into this really tall
That's what I
thing.
mean.
Like,
Bloopers.
please. Yeah,
It's so funny.
yeah.
But it's yeah, I mean obviously players don't want to see that actually in game, but I think it'd be a fun thing to
It doesn't
show
it's
people.
Yeah.
it's funny because players can, there's a small minority of players that can be incredibly unforgiving of bugs or optimization or whatever. And I feel like it would make it for those that are kind of surprisingly unempathetic to the miracle that is any functional piece of software. Um, they'd be more compassionate and empathetic if they saw all that more.
Yeah, I
It
agree. I think
seems
it would also
seemingly
help. Yeah, because
like
Absolutely.
you
yeah,
appreciate what it was until 10
yeah,
minutes before the thing shipped.
yeah. I
You
like
know,
I said, I genuinely think it would also help in terms of like people understanding how difficult things are because that's still clearly a communication problem the industry has is that like we don't really talk about the things that are hard a lot or at the very least not in an accessible way. I mean, I suppose it's part of what we try to do with the show. So people assume they see a bug that devs were lazy and they don't think about the millions of other problems that were more immediate and obvious, like a bird not
Yeah.
flying in space.
yeah,
Like
or the game just not running.
yeah, the game doesn't run at all. Like I've said this before, but I maintain that video games are monsters that are trying to avoid being created at all costs. and that we forcibly pull them into the
Like a
world
Stephen King style
against
demonic
God.
layer to
They don't want to. They're like, I refuse
Love
to
that.
exist. How dare you? And we're pulling them out of something and being like, you will, damn it. And I think it genuinely is against God that we are forcing video games
You need
to
to write
exist.
that short story. That's a short story you need to write.
Games
I
being
can see it.
created as monsters. I stand
I
by
love
it. That's
that.
what making a video game feels like. And then you
Yeah.
come out with something incredibly beautiful and full of waves, which on that, what you've done here is very complicated. I love that you seem to be excited by the complications. When you
Hmm.
are coming up with the concept for this, when you approach something that you know is going to be very difficult, do you come at it from an angle of this is the creative vision, so it doesn't matter how difficult it is? Or is any part of it, this is going to be difficult, let's see how we figure it out? Like, do you think tech first, I suppose is my question, when you're coming up with the creative concepts for like your very unique brand of video games?
Oh, yeah, great question. I think generally I keep it in the back of my mind, but I usually have kind of some aspect of the game that's most clear to me. I could see in like in the very beginning of this game, I knew that the movement was going to be this way. It's like I had never seen a game where you had movement like the old snowboarding games in a world that was more about exploration and more freeform, and you could go uphill, with the surfboard and stuff like that. And so I knew that that had to be smooth, and I had this idea that the waves would help make that work. But and I knew that we maybe could use some of our terrain stuff that we had been playing with to achieve that, but I had no idea if that was like viable at all. And there are definitely times when our programmers, they they always are like, oh man, that's gonna be hard, but they actually want to do it.
Yeah.
Um, Occasionally they're like, oh, that we could do that, it would just take like 10 years. You know what I mean?
Right, right.
So like maybe if you could think of something else, that would be nice. And
Yeah.
then we
I
have to,
love that. I think programmers are a particular kind of person that enjoys essentially like Scottying a problem, like work starting from the point of this is impossible, and then coming slowly working out the manner in which that would be made, which I
It's the
think is
best.
very counterintuitive to a lot of people, but programmers in particular, it's like sculpting out of stone. Like they see the big problem and then they chip away at it until it becomes possible, which is just it's a fascinating creative process to watch. It's really cool.
yeah, and what's so fun about things like the waves in this game or the kelp in Abzu, and also in this game we use it again. Um, they are only really possible if you bring people like that in because it requires a huge amount of technical expertise, but you
Mm.
also need the kind of artistic vision and that kind of artistic side of like, what is this going to make the player feel? Um, and
Hmm.
that's what's so exciting to me is just you get to do a bunch of math, and then that math becomes amazing, beautiful visual art.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah. It is
Uh,
cool. I feel like
yeah.
that's a really interesting point that people maybe don't consider as much as they should, that especially with something like this, where the vibe of the game is so relaxing and it really feels very organic. The programmers have to understand that creative vision very well. You could, say they're the math guys who build the thing, but I feel like in building the math, like you're saying, they still have to completely understand the intention of what
Mhm.
it is going to feel like to actually interact with as a player. Like it is still, in that way, an extremely creative, emotionally driven job, even though they're coding. But
Exactly.
yeah, it requires a feeling, which like
Yeah.
seems very anti-math, but is very cool to think about.
Every
Was there
single line
anything
of
in?
code,
Oh,
they're
sorry.
making a choice. Sorry, but yeah, I was just gonna say that every single line of code, you know, you trust them to go and write that code because you don't know how to do it yourself. And they have to be aligned with you on a high level so that every choice they make as they write it, is going to steer you towards that feeling. And yeah, we're very lucky that we have worked together for a long time with
Yeah.
these folks, and they've really kind of understood that direction. But yeah.
I was going to ask, in terms of that process, can you think of any examples from this in particular, where the act of the program is actually building out something? So, you have this idea, you have this really interesting kind of approach to take. anything that kind of comes out of the process of the making of it? So as they're making stuff, are they showing you things and going, well, this actually seems like this might be interesting? Is it are there ideas that come from that process as well, or does it feel more that they're finding the thing that you've asked them to find, or do they bring their own kind of stuff too as well in
Oh,
the whole
absolutely.
process? Yeah.
Yeah. I try to anticipate everything. I think ahead. I write a big
How's that
document.
going for you? Do you
Yeah,
find that
and
easy?
then you already know where I'm going with
The
this.
proverb is
Um,
man plans and God laughs.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, the second that they start programming it, they're like, oh, how you want me to handle this situation is of course you didn't think of that. And then you have to think about it on the fly, and then it's a conversation. And a lot of the time, um, you realize that you're not going to be able to do exactly what you had planned, but you discover something else that's really cool. And you realize, okay, there's another way to get there, and you can still get to the same kind of end place. Or you realize, actually where we were aiming, it would be cooler if we went this way a little bit. And, um, like in this game, a lot of the way the character moves, um, we tried so many things, and we came to a set of moves based on those experiments, and a lot of them were directly based on you know, um, the work of these gameplay programmers who are
Hmm.
trying out different stuff and realize, oh, I accidentally typed a number and he's jumping 10 times higher and it feels rad, like, can we do it that way? I was like, yeah, let's do that. A lot of times they also feel like guilty about it, kind of. They're like, I don't know, man. He's going so fast. I don't know. Is that crazy? And I'm like, actually, make it faster. Like, just
I
go
will
all the way.
say
Permission for that, yeah.
it's so interesting. It's so interesting to see that dynamic as a sort of quasi outsider of the team. Like I have a really good window into it, and I attend most all of the kind of stand-ups and stuff. But but I'm also not an actual salaried employee, so I don't have the true inside point of view. But from my sort of slightly removed, it is amazing how you can really like. It's not this one-to-one personnel through line from obviously from Journey to Abzu. I mean, essentially it's just Matt. I think Nick Clark might have helped out a bit here and there on Abzu if memory serves, but it's effectively he and I, and far more meaningfully, he are the connective tissue between Journey and Abzu. And then likewise, the team of Abzu to Pathless and then Pathless to Sort of the Sea. There's some folks that have been there for most of the time and others that are recent. And so it's fascinating that in this paradoxical way, there's a real continuity, like in that way we talk about the kind of auteur, like this game is sort of made by this person. And you would think that these are just like hard, big iron stamp, Matt Nava, ruling with an iron fist because of just the sheer amount of continuity. But I can tell you again from watching the dynamic how not led like that it is. Like all these kind of, hey, what if we tried this? What if we tried that? It's not a flat, like what Valve kind of talks about and other studios have tried where it's sort of in a way leaderless. Like Matt's
Yeah.
sort of the tiebreaker. I would think it's fair to say on everything. You're still very much the creative director, but the sort of egoless invitation of everybody to add their 2 cents, the extent to which this game really is an amalgam of everybody's thoughts, like it always blew my mind when there'd be a big meaningful update and like someone I wasn't expecting would go, oh yeah, by the way, I added the, and I'm like, maybe I'm just perpetually nebulous on the precise parameters of everyone, or like boundaries of everyone's role, but it really just felt like everybody could lay claim to all kinds of meaningful updates and contributions. And I don't really understand this paradox. I don't understand how things can all feel so you, while so like there's been this ship of Theseus of people over the years that come through that have all added so much. So I don't know if you know the answer to that, but it's something that I've always
I
been
my
blown away by.
perspective on that as a person who is totally unrelated is that Matt's a really good director. Like I
Yeah,
would
it sounds like
think
a
that
healthy team from
if
what you're
you have
describing.
someone
No.
who is a
Well, that's
good
very
director
sweet.
and communicates well and treats the creatives that they hire with respect, I guess like to like I can't imagine you saying this about yourself, Matt, based on the small conversation we've had, but I think that that is like what you want from a director,
Yeah,
especially with a
it's
smaller team.
and being a director, it's like you're choosing a direction, right? Like, and you have to communicate that to everybody so they all know. But once they do know, then
Mm.
the other part is trusting that they know what they're doing, because the reason you have a team is because you can't do it all yourself. You literally hire people to fill in everything you can't do, and that requires trust. And you know, uh, I constantly am amazed at what these people can do. They're just incredibly talented developers, obviously, and so even but still, like they can, they need direction, and they get lost, and then you have to kind of be able to talk to them in a way that is knowledgeable enough about what they're doing, and all that kind of stuff. Um, but yeah, it really is the case that on this game, everybody had a great idea and it was able, the sad part about being a director is that 90% of the directions, like you choose a direction, is like, well, 360 degrees, one of them is the way you're going, right? So like most of the time you're saying, no, 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 and that's the other part. You have to trust that when you're telling people no, which you have to do all the time, that like they're going to be like, okay, I get it. This is not a
Yeah.
critique of me. This is a critique of this idea, and we can find a better one. And so, that's just uh, a thing about the team culture that you have to build that trust and respect for each
Yeah.
other. So, yeah, really
When
important.
you are initially presenting, I guess I don't know how your ideation process works, but when you're initially presenting your idea, to the rest of the team. I don't know if it comes just from you, I'm not sure. How do you do that? I'm always very interested in how different studios approach the like, and here's the game we're making to the broader team and how they communicate that. Like it can be so different between studios, and I feel like again, your vision here seems so it seems like you've really nailed it. Like in the amount of the game that I played, like it seems like it exactly what you're saying is exactly what I played. So how do you go about communicating that with a team of creatives? Obviously, lots of creative people in a room together are going to have like totally different feelings about things. To make sure that they're both inspired and I guess understand the goals.
Yeah, that's a real big challenge, and a lot of times I'll um, kind of get an opinion from a couple people first before going to the whole team and be like, hey, do you think this is a good idea at all? Like, what do you think about that? Like, is it cool? Is this crazy? And they're like, yeah, that is crazy. You're completely insane, but also it's kind of cool, So, you just double check with a couple, the people that are, been around and you work with a long time and you trust, and then, you let everybody know. And I think that's like the thing that I think really works is that you have to be excited about it yourself. Like you have to really believe that this is going to be cool. you know, and I did, um, so I think everybody kind of was excited too. And then really, let them come up with ideas, like give them space to make it feel like it's theirs too,
Yeah.
because it will be. So yeah. And then if people are like, you know what, I don't know, like um they then you ask for their trust, like, well, maybe you'll see it when it comes together a little more,
Yeah.
and I think that happens too. Yeah.
Yeah. What does your like actual presentation of that look like? Like are you putting together a slideshow? Is it just a big meeting? Do you do design docs ahead of time before sharing them with the team? Like what
All
is
of
the
that.
yeah, all of the above?
All of those. But yeah, what's funny is like I'm just like a concept artist turned director person. And when I was going to school, there was no game design courses or anything. I have no idea, how this is done. And I've been learning. And just watching the pros, like when we were working on Journey, that game company team was in the same building as Sony Santa Monica. So we were walking down the hallway and seeing these guys work on God of War, and we're like, these guys know what they're doing. Like we're just like, oh, how are they doing this? How are they solving these problems? And just trying to copy these giants. But yeah, like over the years, have learned, how to communicate these ideas more clearly, and but also kind of like learned what's important for the way that we make games. And the games that we make are very much about the atmosphere, the visuals, the feeling of playing it. And you have to understand that early. We don't really start with a script or a really thorough game design document. We start with concept art and images and a kind of narrative arc, a flow for the um, emotional experience the player will undergo. And then we flesh it out from there. And that is the kind of core that everything else is kind of morphing to try to become a better support for.
Yeah.
But yeah, we very often have a very clear indication of these are the colors you're going to see in this game,
Yeah.
before we know what the character's name is or what they do or, anything.
That's
Um,
such a lens I've not considered with like directors, that like you almost can tell, not always through the finished project, but definitely from the process of direction, like what the background of the director is. Like I remember working
I was
early in
gonna
my career for a
say
director.
concept art sounds like a great director
That's
to
a
start with
way
because
in, yeah.
it's such easy communication. I was thinking that.
Exactly. And like I worked early in my career, I worked on a game that was directed by someone who had an animation background. So like
Yeah.
he made a short animated film, and we were basically adapting his little animated video into a video game. And like I come from like a coding design background, so all of our games start with a prototype. And then
That's
we don't know what
interesting.
it's going to look like. It's
Hmm.
interesting. I know like a lot of game directors who kind of come from a writing background will write a script. There's these all these different paths in, and I'd never really put two and two together that is in itself a very specific choice and a very specific difference between directors. So, yeah,
It's
it's
part of
really
why I
cool.
ask, is I think the onboarding that different studios have is so different. And I actually wouldn't have
Yeah.
guessed that yours would be prototype. I would have guessed that you would have written something. Like
I
that's
sometimes secretly
surprising.
write something, but I don't give it to the team until. To be honest, most of
Interesting.
our best story ideas come from the team anyway. Like if I get out ahead of the writing, then I write something very generic and boring. I need the people around me to kind of come up with better stories.
Interesting.
I
Hmm.
There you go.
remember, I'm curious if you agree with this, Matt, because we had such different points of view working on Journey, but I always thought it felt like that Genova's way of working was essentially to chase after an emotion with no real allegiance to art direction or even game mechanics and stuff. It was like, I want to feel, you know, lonely. That's all that matters. So what lends itself to feeling lonely? Well, how about walking alone in a desert that's, kind of naturally it's an inhospitable environment. We kind of have a primal reaction to a desert compared to like a lush rainforest or something. Um, and sort of all these things get built up in service of the emotion. But if it turned out that 2D platformer banging blocks and making coins come out is what made you feel lonely, then that could just as easily have been where the design and all
Hmm.
that started heading. That's
Hmm.
always how I've kind of retroactively understood the the process, especially because he was always asking for music. Like there was always this like let's get music as early as humanly possible so that we can all kind of agree on the emotional and I that was novel. Obviously we have our own, you and I have our own version of that I feel like it's a little bit more like writing pilot co-pilot, because everything you just said is so true from my point of view as well, where you're laying out this art and I'm trying to react to it well before there's any kind of game. In fact, one of the cool things for you guys that we do, that no this is kind of the musical equivalent of those kind of like almost like a blooper reel. It's not quite to that degree, but I usually end up creating a lot of music that's essentially sole purposes as throwaway, but like concept art, where I remember in the early days of this one making like a 5 minute track basically that was essentially like a emotional overview of the whole game, where Matt, and again, before there's character names or like the story as it exists in the end. It's just I want to start in this kind of a place. It should kind of build to a moment like this. Then it should go to a thing like this and I create this sort of like hyper condensed 5 minute summary in purely music.
That
Um,
rules, Austin. I like
as
that
a
would be so helpful as a creative person on a team. Like you're saying that you make a song that's like the idea of the soundtrack of a whole flow of the entire game.
It's, like, have you ever seen those where they take like every frame of a movie and stack them in
Like an
succession?
overture almost before you've
Yeah.
written the score. Yeah.
Yeah, we often
That
call them that.
rules. I could see that
Oh,
being
really? Yeah.
so valuable.
It is so cool. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. It does roll. And it's super clarifying because
Yeah.
you listen to the music and you like for me, because I'm so visually minded, I just start to see glimpses of the scene that it should be, supporting in the game. And I can see, like, oh, I it starts to help you understand the idea further. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's really cool. And it helps the whole team. Like, not only is it like it helps you kind of understand the project more, but it's just a really huge morale boost for everybody to be like, oh my
Yeah.
God, this game's gonna be rad.
And
This
I
sounds
feel
so
like it's
cool.
such a good way to communicate a feeling when otherwise it can be extremely difficult to do that. Music's so uniquely good at that particular thing. How do you even start that, Austin? Like how do you take
Hmm.
nothing and be given a vague idea and come up with something that you then use to inspire other people? That's insane. Explain what you do for a living. I still don't
um,
understand.
How do you do it?
I mean, obviously, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. You know, like I have a real strong sense and affinity for the like in the like with Matt where he's coming from. Like it's one of those crazy. It's very lucky because these are the kind of games that I would love playing. Like so it's one of those crazy like holy crap, is this life? Kind of experiences because this is sort of especially where I'm at right now in my life. These are the kind of games I'm all about. It's
Yeah.
either games like this or some like 100-hour slog through a Baldur's Gate 3 like heavily systems
Yeah.
driven game. Like I kind of swing back and forth between those two types in my gaming diet, and so this uh anyway, I think because of that a lot of it sort of just seems to happen because I just sort of I don't know, I feel like I'm on a pretty similar wavelength as to what the goal is. Like it's actually one of those funny things where that in itself is not in a vacuum either. Like my taste has been shaped by this
Mm.
15 plus years of collaboration, where it's like I probably had we never crossed paths and I'd never worked on Journey and never been part of this giant squid adventure, it'd probably be not just different taste as a gamer, a very different thinking as a composer. You can't really like your work and who you are is also integrated, that the more you do a thing, you develop, you either start to get repulsed by it and need to change what you're doing, or you start to really, grow with it. It's like working out. If you keep doing it, the muscle will theoretically expand, um, so yeah, I don't know. So it's in a way it gets easier every time to start because there's this history, but also just a natural like, nope, I totally get what you're going for.
Like you have a
And
creative compatibility.
oh, 1,000%.
Yeah.
That's every composer's dream is to find someone where you just so much is sort of uncommunicated telepathy in a way. And but that said, I also like to do those little overtures where I can throw a bunch of different ideas at the wall, and Matt will be like, "Oh, that sound at 47 seconds, whatever that is, that's super cool. We could probably build on that. That could be more of a feature of this thing. That thing at a minute 27, for whatever reason, doesn't really feel like this game." And funny, a great example of this actually was on the early drafts of the path list when I was doing that same kind of process of like, here's a 5 minute summary of the whole game based on what we've talked about so far. I remember at one point, because it has these big boss fights, um, I was looking for ways to do like what's our version of like boss music, basically, games
Hmm.
that are not super combat driven and therefore they don't really like, and hopefully just in general avoid cliches anyway, but they really don't lean on the kind of gameplay cliches. When you say boss battle, they're very
Hmm.
different. They're sort of like the world's most chill boss battles while still being boss battles. And so I remember I played with a bunch of different ways to try to achieve that. And at one point I had this like featured marimba solo where I was like, wouldn't it be cool if it was just like really elaborate marimbas? I don't know if you even remember this, Matt, because it was really early, but you bounced off that pretty hard. You were like, it's not like there's no marimbas in the pathless. Like that was one of those where I kept, and I remember I thought
That's
it was,
where you put your foot down.
I put my foot down.
Absolutely
There
no
it goes, man.
well, it was,
Absolutely not.
the goal is always to put like more on the table than we need so
Totally.
that you can find the stuff and it's not like I'm just left with, well, then I don't know because
No,
there's
it's
just no
almost
ideas
helpful for you to
left.
make the wrong call and have you be told that it's wrong than to reserve, right? Like you want to be like, this?
I'd
Okay,
rather
not
think,
that.
yeah, it's like a buffet at a restaurant where the goal is you like, okay, yeah, sure, it would be amazing if everything on there looks equally enticing to you, but that would actually
Yes.
be like almost paralyzing if that was the case. Ideally,
Yes.
you see a thing and you're like, okay, a bunch of that, little bits of these other things, don't need these other things. And I just remember that this marimba thing I was really excited about, and then it just sort of made its way into the dustbin. And so then we come to this game, and in the interim, I had discovered this wonderful Thai version, sort of a marimba that's called a Renatum. And I know these musicians in Bangkok, and I was like, what if we got like six of those guys playing together? And that one made it through. We've got our
Just
sort of
trying to get those marimbas in,
It's
man.
been
I
taking
hear
them for
ya,
a long
man.
time.
I was yeah, it was
You'll
like
never take the marimbas from me.
damn yeah, exactly. Damn near 10 years in the making, but I finally
That's
got
crazy.
but that's one of those where yeah, like I do the process just to like actually address what you were asking is you know some of it's just iteration. In the case of this one, there was a cool moment where Matt came down to my studio here, and I was just kind of noodling around on my piano. Like I have this upright kind of janky actual piano, not a keyboard. Um, and we were talking about the game and that sense of momentum, especially, Pathless really nailed that feeling, and this game was kind of building on that sense of just the how great it feels to just move so effortlessly and to kind of, you know, you don't have to get good at it at all to enjoy that. But if you do get good at it, it gets really cool. Both games really kind of have a nice arc to the to the movement, I guess you could say. Anyway, we were talking about that sort of stuff, and I just started kind of like playing around on the piano, and Matt was basically like, that should be the game. Basically, like what you just did, and which was one of those like I would not have done that. It actually felt counter to the game without him saying, because piano I think of as an instrument that makes things kind of intimate and small and familiar, like they feel of the earth in our timeline. And a
Sure.
game that's not that, it's in its own world, it's in
And
its
quite
own kind of
expansive.
yeah, like it's weird how piano and to a degree guitar have a tendency to kind of just everyone either plays it or knows someone who does or has picked one up at some point, or they're just so familiar, whereas
Mm.
even just like a violin or a cello, which are not exactly rare instruments either, but there's something, they're not homey the way those are. And I'm probably overthinking it, but it was one of those where I always avoid it. I just can't think of having ever been hired to do like like you think of, remember that Adam Driver movie, Marriage Story. Like there's not a lot of games that are sort of the equivalent of that, where you're like, let's make this very like grounded thing about what it's like to go through a divorce. And like most games are to some degree or another kind of fantastical, even if they are not fully so. And so piano is just a thing I find myself not really using because it seems to directly contradict the fantastical quality in my own little weird
Really
world of
interesting.
bias,
Hmm.
which was why it's cool. Because then when Matt like fell in love with that as an idea, I would never have put that in there at all. And now it's like the kind of core, it's omnipresent through the whole thing.
Hmm.
It's, even though there's all this other stuff going on and choirs and children's choirs and all this stuff, the piano is kind of the nucleus. And yeah, I guess it's an interesting, now that I say this out loud, I guess it is an interesting microcosm of what I was asking about before with the kind of paradox of how can this all feel like such a you project, but everyone else has this agency. Like I would never have featured piano, but that's basically the only suggestion you made on the entire score. Otherwise, everything else, I would go, what about this? And you mostly were like, cool, do it. So yeah, I guess that explains it.
I also just like feel like that is such a good showcase of just how fucking cool game development is. Like it's basically you are the only person who is involved in this game, I imagine, who is thinking about the otherworldliness of a piano. You know what I mean? Like you bring that level of
I don't know.
opinion
Teams,
and
every in my experience,
maybe, but
it's
I doubt that
astounding
many
how
people
opinionated
like
everybody can get on music.
writing is definitely the same. Everyone has an opinion. It's crazy. But
Yeah.
like it's you have this wealth of knowledge about this specific thing and feelings that you bring to a project that are like so different to a programmer, that are so different to Matt, especially with a concept artist background, and you just kind of like find a way for all of these extremely different disciplines with extremely different backgrounds to meet in the middle and make something that you like inspire each other. I feel like video games are so unique with that particular effect as a creative medium. And I think it's just incredibly cool that you can then come out with something where nobody's thinking about those pieces. The people who are playing this, as somebody who's played it, is like, man, this is really relaxing. Wow, that's pretty. This is really cool. But there's so much like effort and thought and expertise that goes into giving me a feeling of just calm that you never really think about unless you sit down and dissect it like this. And I just think that's very cool.
Oh
Game
yeah.
development, real cool.
Yeah. I really wish, like to your earlier thing about bloopers and all that kind of behind the scenes, like in a way, I wish people could see some of the team playthroughs that would happen, because what's so cool is the team is big enough that obviously you
How
can,
big is the team?
It was like 12 to 16, 20-ish range throughout the project. Yeah.
which is like, obviously that's in my mind, that's sort of in the middle. Like big teams is this huge spectrum, because in my mind, once you get up into like 50 to 100, you're really kind of abandoning the mid-range. But there's also really amazing games that have been made. I mean, look at freaking Undertale or something, which is, like a guy.
Stardew Valley.
At Stardew
Okay.
Valley. Yeah, like there are, so team size, like I feel like Giant Squid has this sort of magical size where it can get pretty ambitious. Like all that talk about the wave tech, for example,
Yeah.
it's pretty hard for just a solo dev to whip out something of that level of complexity that would also have the artistic visual fidelity and all that animation and, the lighting. And it just seems like you do
Yeah.
need a certain minimum critical mass of people to hit that kind of thing. But it's not so big that everyone doesn't kind of have their hand. Like
Yeah.
I joke about it, but I would get feedback from people on the team, or like ideas, like the animator uh is a guitarist and would periodically message. I even had to he played guitar on Pathless, like in the score, just for
He's
fun.
really good.
Um, and he would send me, DMs on Slack sometimes. That's like, hey, we were working on this part, and I just found myself thinking, wouldn't it be cool if there was something like this, or like, this thing that you did over here in the game could be, or like, Kiyome would message me all the time with thoughts, and or like in the team playthroughs, everyone would be on, like Matt would be playing through on Discord for everyone to watch, and if something popped up, like especially if there was something that seemed weird, or you go, is that just an odd choice, or was that a bug, with the music? Everyone felt comfortable to chime in about that, and likewise about each other's, like, hey, what's up with that animation or whatever. And I don't know, it's like, it seems like it's exact sweet spot where no one feels like they're just kind of anonymously, like I should just take notes and report to my boss or whatever. Like you have to kind of just disappear into this big hierarchy.
Hmm.
But I don't know, but obviously it's still big enough that you can do something ambitious.
Yeah.
Yeah, the size of the team is interesting because it's just big enough that it's a struggle to know what everybody's doing. If you're small enough, then everybody just knows what everybody's doing. And I had that experience when I was working on Flower, and it was like eight people, and this is like, I know we don't need to worry about it. Production, what is that? Um, but now we're at the size. There's like, okay, you actually have to produce this thing. You have to
That's
make
a
sure
funny way to put
everybody's
it.
voice gets heard.
You're a
And you can't.
producer size.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to accept that and figure it out. But this project that really came together, and you can't just bring everybody on the call and be like, everybody's on the call, they can all, everybody's voice will be heard. It's like, no, they won't speak up because everybody's on the call, and it's,
Yeah.
intimidating. And you have to like create systems and interactions where you make sure that everybody feels heard. And that's just such a hard thing to think about that like, you know, is actually a big part of, running a team and all that stuff that you don't really see directly in the game, but it's something that we think about a lot, behind the scenes.
I guess it's also
Um,
admitting that you kind of have to do business. Like when you're thinking about
Yeah.
how to structure meetings, like your team size that you like, you now also have to be a businessman. And that's
mhm.
like, it's like a whole separate thing. But at a certain point, it is required. Otherwise, you'll never actually make anything.
Yeah,
You have to
you gotta
structure creatives.
structure it. And the other thing is that at the size we're at, your graphics are able to be, high fidelity and all these kind of things, but you're still making a pretty short game, you know? And like we decided this time to like make it shorter than our previous game, like really condense it, like make there be really no fat on this thing. It's just all dense content.
Yeah.
And every single part is like handcrafted and because that's what we realized that's what we can do best. But it's not an 80-hour long game, um and the gaming audience is used to seeing that kind of graphic fidelity and being like, oh, this is going to be 200 hours or something crazy, so like there's this kind of odd expectation that you have to meet, and so yeah, that's just the challenge of this scale studio. And there's not too many of other studios like our size out there. It's commonly smaller or bigger.
Yeah.
So
Mike, you were about the same size, right?
We
20-ish.
were, yes, yeah, about 20.
Did you feel similarly about that? Like there was a certain barometer where you had to start structuring your meetings and you didn't
Oh,
have insight to
totally.
what everyone was doing?
And exactly as like reluctant to do it as Matt was, like
Yeah.
100%. Like, no, we can keep
yeah,
doing
yeah.
things the same way we did it when there was four of us. This is fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's you become insanely respectful of producers. And it's a
Yeah.
weird one as well. I don't know your background, Matt, but coming up in other people's studios, like producers were always like the teachers telling me to do my homework. Like it was always kind of a, I respected them in the same ways you respect any authority figure, but like I didn't like producers very much. And then suddenly you realize at this stage, like,
How
no,
important
that's
they are.
that's how stuff actually gets made, and that it is kind of invisible and thankless because you're not nobody's going to say, wow, the production on this game seems like it was really good. Like this game really feels like a game that was scheduled
I bet
correctly.
I bet these
Like,
meetings were really
True.
efficient.
but
Yeah.
absolutely every aspect of the game is elevated by good production and good scheduling and good structure. So yeah, no, I was very grateful for the number of producers we had towards the end as that was going across the finish line. But yeah, it was
What's the
yeah,
point where
really
that
cool team.
flips? Like, do you have like a number where you're like, all right, we got to hire a producer?
I don't know, Matt. I don't know what your answer would be. Mine would be around 10 to 15 was where it really strained under the weight. And that was where we couldn't just exist in to-do lists and a conversation
Yeah.
every day between the team. Is that similar for you, 10 to 15? Or would you say
Yeah,
did you get
absolutely.
further before it
I
came
think
in?
it also other factors like if you're all remote, that
True.
Yep.
number goes down. Like if you're in the same room, you can, get along and figure it out just by like walking around and seeing what people have on their monitor. But as soon as we hit remote, we're like, oh, that is a new challenge.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah.
Yeah, with wildly different time zones in some cases.
hmm Yeah. We're working with one dev who's in Japan, and so, you know,
Yeah.
very crazy.
Yeah. I feel like, look, so the team at Tall Order Games, the studio that I'm currently narrative directing a game at, is 3 people, right? It's great. I love it. Austin and I were having a conversation maybe like 2 days ago where it was like, I think that I would have a really tough time going back to AAA now because the like we're talking about in this conversation, the like cross-discipline freedom is amazing. I'm doing level design. It's my favorite thing in video games. Like the games I love and games I like, the difference is always level design. Like I love good level design and getting to do it because I have to because there's only 3 of us. I do the skeleton and then they make it all better, but is so
Sure.
so 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 fun. That said, I think I might be the producer on the game, and I'm now thinking, does that make me an asshole? In that, like, I set up Trello boards
Makes you a
and
grown up. So it
added due
makes you.
dates, and I've made sprints. Does that make me the devil that I was like, here's this
Yeah.
AAA thing. Should I not be doing
It
it?
Yeah, there's
sounds
And
like
they're
a
like
like,
you're
WhatsApp group about how
extremely
much of an
valuable,
arsehole you are,
the only two other
100%.
people being like,
Yeah,
due
yeah,
dates,
yeah.
really? And I'm
God,
like,
did you
well,
see
I
what
have to
Lana
keep
put
us
on
on
the
track
Trello
somehow,
today?
though.
Jesus. Yeah, yeah, 100%.
To be fair, I'm not telling
Craziness.
them when they have to have things due because how would I fucking know? Like, I can't tell
Yeah.
a programmer how long it's going to take him to do something, but I'm like, could you add a timeline on here so that we like understand when certain
Well, I
things are
mean,
being
not
done?
to immediately support your terrified fear of
That I'm
becoming
an
a producer,
asshole.
but
Yeah.
like what you just described is production. Like you never tell
No,
a
totally.
programmer how long something will take. You ask a programmer and you hire a programmer who will give you a good answer to that question
That's
and
true.
will
That's true.
figure it out.
I'm like,
So yeah, you're being a
am I the
producer there.
devil? Well, yeah,
You
but I
are the
also
devil.
I am a producer and then I have to produce this podcast and it's like it doesn't sound like anything, but it just naturally is a thing that I have to do is like organize when
So
things
I
are
feel
happening
like
and when
that
things aren't
actually
fucking happening.
contradicts my earlier point about not being able to tell producer. I think every single person who listens to this podcast is very aware of how hard your job specifically is, Alon. I think that's something that
Of
100% of people listening
producing?
are producing this
Yeah,
podcast.
this podcast, yeah, there's a lot of
Keeping us on
challenges.
track.
The team's pretty difficult to work with, really
Yeah, that's
environment.
what I'm
Yeah, it's
saying.
tough.
Just barely worth it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just barely.
just inching across that line. Yeah,
Then I'm wondering, like, like when either of your teams are smaller, how are you tackling things like due dates? I imagine I'm only doing sprints because I'm used to it from AAA, but like,
the biggest thing for me um, that improved everything overnight was in terms of production was not doing sprints actually.
no way.
really.
Yeah, sprints were just like they work for different teams and different people, and I think that I had been in a lot of different kind of production systems that didn't work for me.
Hmm.
Um, but I realized that sprints is incompatible with me.
That's
So you're
And
interesting.
doing
Maybe
like a
I should probably,
waterfall thing where you're just trying to get through the big list? Like how do you structure how do you know how long something's going to take, or is it much more loose than that?
yeah.
it's actually much more loose because I don't really mind how long things take, just as long as they get done, which is kind of a
Sure.
weird thing to say, I guess, but I
But like
trust.
your bank account probably minds though, right? Like there's probably some kind of pressure, or is there, or are you guys in a place where you can just like say it'll be done when it's done? Is that kind of
Oh
where
no,
you're at as a
absolutely
studio?
not. We
Okay,
are
all
very
right.
much
So
up
there is a
against the
question. There is
clock,
an answer.
absolutely. And this game in particular was a mad dash.
Yeah,
Um, but the thing that we do to organize it is we have like a backlog of all the tasks, and they just
right.
go in there, and then everybody has a list of tasks they're thinking about, and if that list is more than like 7 to 10 things, then it's like you're not actually thinking about it right now. Put it back in the backlog, you know.
Gotcha.
Do you have
And
due dates on those things?
no, we just check in every day with everybody. Well, not every day.
That's
We do
crazy to me. It's like I fully understand it, and now I'm like thinking about it. I'm like I should probably actually talk to my team to be like, do you guys like working this way? And that sprints like the way that I structure them is just we will have this particular thing done by this time. This is what we're working on for the next like 6 weeks or whatever.
it's a totally viable way to work. The thing that
Yeah,
didn't
but
work for
so
me
is
about
yours, which
yeah,
it's very interesting to think about.
yeah, it's really crazy. There's lots of different methodologies, but the thing that just made me struggle with sprints was at for a team at the scale we were at, you have to have a conversation with leads and you say, okay, what is this person going to do? What is this person going to do? What is this? That meeting takes an entire day.
A
And
lot of the
then
time,
you're exhausted. And then you
yeah,
have to communicate that to the team. Basically, just getting the sprint thought through, planned, task listed, and communicated to the team takes an entire week. And then you're like, they're 3 week sprints or 4 week sprints, like actually subtract 1 week from that, and you're
yeah.
exhausted.
I see what you mean.
And so instead of having this kind of planning session, execution session, planning session, execution session, it was like you're just constantly kind of overlapping, and
Yeah,
you just make sure everybody's list is at 7 to 10 items. And the backlog is always there. And then if they're like, I don't know what to do, then you just like, oh, put something in for the backlog. If you notice,
interesting.
like, has this been on here a really long time? Then you just ask about it and say like, hey, what's going on? Should we
It
put this on someone else?
Fascinating.
And so,
it
Hmm.
seems like something you're pretty good at, which I suspect is very tied in with what you're describing is you've never been afraid to kind of keep the final scope of the game this liquid object so that if certain things are taking longer or certain things come in quickly, the quality is the constant, but how much of it then therefore becomes like the more actively loose variable. Like you're not going, it's going to be a 5 hour game and not a minute shorter. If it's like trending a certain direction, it just seems like you've never been afraid to make cuts or to like reduce scope or to say, oh, we can simplify here because it makes the quality better. But I would think that that's tied in with what you're saying because it's not all trying to be all regimented out, right? Aren't you basically just saying, oh, it turns out this thing is taking a little bit longer than, like this, like the wave tech. I'm just making up an example because I don't actually remember this, but let's say like the wave tech to look the right way is taking a little longer. So maybe, you know, all these areas we had planned to use it, we don't need all of them because what matters is that it look good and feel good. And so how many can we now do in the amount of time? Is that like a fair description of the
Well, I
highest
think
level planning?
the one thing that everybody at Giant Squid would tell you is that I'm the person who's exploding the scope. That's
Well, I
like
guess
literally they
it's a
call me a
two-stage process. You go,
overscope.
let's do
Yeah.
this, and it explodes, and then and then as the data starts to come in on where the reality of that, because there've been a lot of meetings where I feel like you go, okay, so this thing we were gonna do, we're not gonna do that anymore.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
I am the one who eventually cuts the thing. But I'm always trying to figure out how to uncut it. And in fact, we've had some major uncuts in the process of making our games. Like Abzu, we uncut walking, which was not going to be in the game. And there's a whole
No
chapter
way,
where you
wow.
walk. Yeah. And in this
I
game,
forgot
we
that.
we uncut lots of stuff.
When you say uncut, do you mean like you got to a point where you realized that you had the time to do it and
Well,
brought it back?
basically, it was like we cut it because it was too crazy to
Yeah,
do. And then you realize, no, we absolutely need this to make the game great. And then you figure out how to do some version of it that limits the scope into a shape that you can actually achieve.
gotcha.
And so we figured out a way to uncut it and bring it back, but usually not at nearly at the original scope. It's limited to one moment in Abzu. And because the original version of walking in Abzu was going to be like at any point you can drop down and just start walking on the seafloor, you know. But then it was scoped down to be like you can jump out of the water and land on things above the water and walk on them and then jump back down. And then we made all the spaces where you can walk really small,
Yeah,
you know,
that makes sense.
stuff like that.
There you go. I realize that we are well over time. Uh, Sorry about that. Hopefully, no one's missing a meeting. I
Oh
apologize.
no.
It's my bad. Very interesting conversation. Sort of the sea. Where can people get it? Where can they check it out? And
Yeah. It's a PlayStation 5 game. It's also on Steam. It's if you have the PlayStation Plus Tier 2, then you can play it for free, which is really cool.
awesome.
Um, and yeah, hope you enjoy it.
Yeah. Is there anything else that like you'd want people to know before they jump into playing this game, or just go for it?
I should just jump in. Yeah, it's an atmospheric game and just get lost in it. That's it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us, Matt. Appreciate your time. Where can people find you?
Um, I
Dox
am
yourself.
What's your
I'm
home address
hard to
and social
find.
Just
security?
open those blinds and we'll get the community to figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm usually not too online, but I am on Blue Sky occasionally. So, but yeah, mostly I talk to the world through my video games. So,
Beautiful. The dream. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Alana. See you next time. Bye.
indeed, thank you.